Welcome everybody. Thanks for joining. We may have more folks trundled in, but let's go ahead and get started so we have enough time. Samantha's book is quite a book, and it's like we're going to need that. We may need several sessions to really dig into it. So, uh, I got the chance to sit next to Samantha at a lunch that David Hodgson hosted a couple of weeks ago. He started doing these kind of East Bay regeneration lunches every couple of weeks, and it's been fun to find new folks. And Samantha was I was kind of browsing through the book that she's just put out, and I was thinking that there's just a lot of insights for GRC from the perspective that she's taking around. Regeneration begins at home. I guess it's my restatement of it, but maybe you could clarify that for us, Samantha. Um, at two levels, really. I mean, one is just kind of the thought that she's put into her conceptualization, and a beautifully written conceptualization too. I've just started to read the book, but it is lovely. And also just kind of from the change maker perspective, we were hoping that we could have some conversation around, why a book and what do you do with a book and how do we help kind of with the regeneration process in the future through different modalities, and how is she thinking about that? So I'd love to hear kind of substance and process, both. But like I said, there's a lot here. Uh, but Samantha, if it's okay with you, what I thought I would try to do is just kind of turn it over to you. Um, Dan, thanks so much for sharing this time slot. This is normally the regenerative learning space, and so I kind of feel, well, that probably fits pretty well anyway. So we're not too far off topic, I think.
No, it's
But maybe
yeah,
some
it's pretty close.
introduction
It's really on
to
topic
who
as
you
I
are
started
and
reading the
kind of where
book.
you got there, and then just take us into the book, and we can discuss, and you can present as you feel fit.
Fantastic. It's just really good to see you all. I have no doubt that everyone who's here is in the trenches. I've been my tongue-in-cheek kind of li internal LinkedIn profile these days says in the trenches of civilization transition, but then the kind of joke there that's a little bit of a snide meta crisis joke is that none of us can not we can't not be in the trenches if you're paying attention. Um, So I'll show you my book. This is my little show and tell moment. This book is called True Human: Reimagining Ourselves at the End of Our World. And I'm a regenerative practitioner in some ways for a very long time. I've been in the permaculture space as one of the spaces I occupy since my early 20s. And I've also been in community development. My path has involved a very countercultural ground in the body and nature as ways to make sense of ourselves, as of self and world and humans. And I started dancing when I was 14. I locked myself in a wrestling room at my high school and started making dances about what it means to be a citizen and what it means to come home and war and peace and the deep psychological architecture of psychospiritual architecture of meaning. And then that took me on a path that included permaculture and a lot of community development. Um, so I'm a systems theorist by virtue of very deep study of the body and community and living systems, um, but not by virtue of an academic training in systems theory. I have a master's in that includes systems theory, but I imagine there's quite a few PhDs here, so I don't think of myself as an academic. I think of myself as a practitioner, as a student of humanness and of earthness, of Gaia, of and the way that I this book frames it frames the moment as a meta crisis. I imagine, Dave, are people here familiar with is the meta crisis a normative language for this community?
I personally hate the framing, but lots of other people in this group I think are probably very comfortable with it. So
We
it's
talk about it
attention,
every
but
day.
we talk about it every day.
Okay, cool. Um, Yeah, I frame this moment as a meta crisis, and then I frame the kind of epochal opportunity as an opportunity to recontextualize ourselves in terms of our role as a species within the biosphere. That we're coming to the end of an age that has involved immense evolution of technology and science and human capacity, but it's also been based on a story of our separability with nature. And what I think is an incorrect view of ourselves at the top of the evolutionary pyramid. So the kind of core of regeneration being an inside job is to put ourselves back on the level of identity and ontology into the circle of life and see, feel, sense ourselves as part of an evolutionary process where we have a very particular role to play. So I think of human organisms as uh, an emergence of a category of organism that occurs on a Gaia. I take the view that our Earth is the most rare, precious um, place of learning and evolution in the universe, and that we're not the only one. That Gaia is a category that occurs in extraordinary, um, in a very small category of planets in this universe, and that on these planets, in the boot up of complex life, there arises a creature, a category of organism that is capable of self-differentiating from its environment with the impulse to know itself, and that we are that category of organism with the sufficient complexity to want to know ourselves as something other than the biological process. And I call that category of organism a creator, preserver, destroyer species, which mirrors the Hindu trinity of Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva. And um, so taking that perspective of being these like uniquely creative, uniquely destructive organisms who are also capable of preservation, or to unpack that more deeply in this moment of detoxification and regeneration and the custodial and artist and engineer function inside biospheric process. So that's the view that I take on what a human is, that we are something very unique um, on an evolutionary level, on an ecological level, and that the whole move at this point is to place ourselves back um, into context as a very particular kind of creature who has the capacity to make or break worlds. Which then chunks down, and this book is really about like how to embody that, both as an internal process and as a cultural process. And so we took we decided to explore in to put the heading on this conversation. Regeneration is an inside game or an inner job, begins at home, which I think is a little bit of a paradox, as I'm sure you are all well aware. Like when we're nested inside systemic processes, that it doesn't matter how much it doesn't matter how much you meditate or pray, but B, it doesn't really matter how much a single person takes a worldview if the world is not commensurate with that worldview. And that's what we're struggling with at scale right now, is that there's actually a majority of human beings who are relatively ethical, relatively collaborative, relatively available to be good humans with other humans. And there's a small minority of people nested within systemic processes that incentivize those sociopathic dark triad kind of traits. This is a really big problem. But nonetheless, it matters that we get clear about what kinds of worldviews are ways. Shannon, it's good to see you um, in a different context. It really matters that we get clear about some very basic principles that could root culture and identity in being regenerative human beings, in being here for what I talk about as the continuity and emergence of life's song, or being net contributive to the fabric of life in a way that generates greater beauty, abundance, and diversity for all beings. Yeah. I will also say that True Human is very much a spiritual invitation. It's about biospirituality. It's a spiritual invitation into the path of walking in alignment with Gaia as a creator, preserver, destroyer species, and also as an individual who is in recovery from the doctrines of separability. Stan, it's also good to see you. Now that I
Yeah.
see Shannon, I didn't connect the dots until now that I see Shannon.
It's okay.
Yeah, I didn't really plan a talk. So what I want to do is read a little piece to kind of jog a conversation about both. I want to frame this as there's this. I take the view that I like to look at the process that we're in through Marvin Harris's cultural materialism kind of lens, that to work to be regenerative stewards is to kind of sit with the trinity of our infrastructures, our social structures, and our superstructures. So to unpack what he meant by that, or one way to think about that is that, in the regenerative community, we're working on new economic mechanisms, for example, to get people to engage those new economic mechanisms requires new social structures, also new infrastructures, new tech infrastructures, but also new behavioral structures and new protocols and practices and conceptions and behaviors around value exchange, and contracts and how we think about value generally. So then as we think how we think about value generally would start to move towards a superstructure that we would say, well, what if you flip profit on its head and you said, if it's extractive, it's not profitable? And I think this is a really kind of weird but helpful thought experiment, is like, obviously, there's no profit in the future if it's not regenerative. So what would regenerative profit look like? And that's a very broad and kind of sloppy thought experiment, but it's a useful one because you start to think about, well, what would a story of value look like that was attached to increased fecundity and abundance and well-being, as opposed to extraction of natural and human capital. Um, that's a superstructure kind of experiment. So this book addresses more predominantly superstructures and social structures than it does infrastructures. And I think it's useful to hold all of those as regenerates, as people who are doing regenerative work, and get curious how we're embodying the new superstructures, and also how the infrastructures and or social structures that we're building are instantiations of an emergent superstructure that could be so beautiful as a human species who has created a persistent and created a civilization that is regenerative, a civilization that is ecologically aligned, a civilization that nurtures the health, well-being, and abundance of all creatures and all beings. This is the orientation that I'm in with this book. So, um, does that land for people? I'd love to hear a few voices. Yeah, yeah,
Sure thing.
great. I think I'll start with my favorite poem in the book, which is towards the beginning, that I think just might validate and explain what I mean by regeneration as an inner game, um, or point to, as poems do. This reality we share. I will not help you to create your own reality. But if you want my help to create your part in this reality we share, I'm here. If you want to retrieve the organic intelligence of your body, mind, and soul. Restore the empathic capacity of your heart. Retrieve the majesty of your senses and reclaim awe in this one blessed life. I am here. If you want me to mirror your sovereignty, to support you in becoming your unique soul essence, disabused of trauma and armors, secure in your belonging, and free to respond to the calling of this world, I am here. If you want a kind friend with whom to let down your walls as you feel your way back into interbeing with the living web of life, I am here. I will be the resonant voice and body who invites you to soften, to open, to consider the possibility of truly coming home. I will remind you of your non-separation with all other selves and things. We are here. I am here praising the same sun, breathing the same air, subject equally to gravity and time, grounded on this same planet's skin. I am here in devotion to what we can only do co-creatively, to tend the beauty of the one life we all share. I am with you singing my part in the symphony of soul. There's a part for you in this reality we share. Join me here.
It's
Oh,
it's lovely.
You're welcome, Lynn. Yeah, so here we are. I think we've already joined. We wouldn't be on this call if we hadn't. I've been having this privilege of being in circles of people where just the circle itself signals value alignment, and it's pretty amazing. It's really a privilege that I don't take lightly. So with that, I could go in so many different directions, Dave. Shall I go to the inner or shall I go to the cultural? What do you feel?
Well, I
Samantha,
mean, I think it's a good idea. Like, I know Shannon looks like you're starting to talk too, but maybe just kind of get a couple of quick reactions from folks, and
I'd love
then we'll
that.
see where it leads.
Yeah, let's do
I
that.
thank you, David. I just want to say, Samantha, your words are such poetry to my soul. And what I'd like to ask is this from your book, True Human.
Hmm. Yes.
It is your voice.
Yes,
I
it is.
thought
These
it
are
was.
all, it's from my
I
voice.
needed
Yes.
to have that confirmation because that just ah, it echoes everything but it does it in such a beautiful way.
Mm.
I do believe that humanity would be able to sing that song in those words without reservation.
Mm.
And so I'm really glad to be in this conversation. And I want to say, Dennis, thank you so much for getting us here. Stan and I followed you, and thank you so much for coming and making this possible. Thank you so much. And I see Brian has got his hand up, and he's been chomping at the bit to talk to you, Samantha. And David, thank you so much for convening this. And I'm stepping back now. Thank you very much.
Mm.
Thank you, Samantha. It was great to have the chance to meet here. And I appreciate your actually mentioning Gaia. It reminds me of the day I had with Sir James
Oh,
Lovelock more than a decade ago.
yeah.
A mutual friend introduced us, and I had read all of his books, and we just had an afternoon to really discuss the complex system that is the Earth system, and the complex system that represents life on this planet, and the
Mhm.
connections of the two halves of Ocean Mother Earth, and
Mm.
how that feeds back and comes together. And I loved watching your interview with Nate Hagens last quarter. It was really inspiring. It was like that was on fire. It was really wonderful, but I mean in a good way. And and then I had the um, opportunity to read the first two chapters of your book this morning, and I'll have to say a couple of the sayings really struck me. Not
Mm.
only did you define and identify the role that you feel that you want to play on Ocean Mother Earth. But I found in it a passage that really resonated with what I've been trying to do, and that is to place technology in service of diverse life through the design and development of everything needed for decentralized, abundant stellar communities. And as a technologist with 3 decades in Silicon Valley, there's I had plenty of experience as a system engineer with technology development. But what seems to be a path less traveled is the development of technology that's truly regenerative. And one of my colleagues from Stanford, Tony Seba and James Arbib, wrote this book called Stellar last year. And it talked about technologies that could be placed in service of diverse life that was not extractive, using renewable energy, identifying ways to produce enough food for 10 billion people while producing enough habitat for 8 million species. And then finally, abundant labor and what that means in a post-extractionary world. And what I think inspired me the most about Stellar is the idea that we are within 1 or 2 decades of really moving to a post-extraction system. And the opportunity, I think, is to develop communities that are post-extractionary, and I really identify technologies that can be placed in service of diverse life. And so, anyway, thank you for that, and would love to explore that further with the group.
I'm so sorry I popped off. It's never happened before in the
Oh,
middle.
no worries. Let me know when it fell off. I think the idea was to help build regenerative technology that moves us beyond extraction within 10 years or 20 years. And according to Stellar, that can be done with abundant renewable energy, abundant food security through several new technologies that let us produce more food while rewilding most of pastures and most of farmland to create habitat for 8 million species that are in crisis right now. And then
Yeah,
finally, abundant labor that lets us move to decentralized and post-extractionary communities. So that's what we're looking forward to doing. We do some work in the ocean, and we've got some regenerative tech there, but it's the road less traveled to find technology that is not extractive, that can move towards regeneration of diverse life on Ocean Mother Earth. Thank you.
exactly. And oh my God, I want to learn about what you're doing. I'm so excited about what
Pleasure.
you're doing. And I want to highlight in chapter 13,
Mm-hmm.
there's one of the subtle whispers that runs through the book. And I'm about to put out a couple. I have put out one Substack about this. I'm going to put out a couple more. Is technocultural maturity, and like claiming that the people who have defined so-called techno optimism are non-initiated creatures of separation
Mm.
who have no idea what optimism would actually look like. Or what maturity would actually look like, which would look like embracing the custodial function to create increased complexity in the direction of flourishing life.
Mm-hmm.
And
Exactly.
often sometimes decreased complexity too, as you well know, right?
Yes.
But there's a section in chapter 13 called I think it's called technological maturity, or it's either called technological maturity or planetary maturity. And I've been sort of toggling back and forth between these two, is that on one level, we're talking about planetary maturity, planetary relational maturity at appropriate holons of scale.
Right.
And on another level, we're talking about the transition from, techno adolescence to techno cultural maturity.
Mm-hmm.
And like the language is a little slippery because there's two related concepts, one of which is like kind of pointing to um, the quality of technologies in a mature civilization
Right.
that is in planetary scale, Lovelock
Oh, yes. And
vision.
you're touching on a really key part of this, and that is how do we feed 10 billion people and preserve habitat for 8 million species concurrently? And we know that we're not going to have a socially acceptable solution unless we do feed 10 billion people. And I've been a recent student of organic farming and impressed with how low the productivity level is as compared to what we're used to in the grocery store. And yet there are approaches that work. I point to, let's see, Regenesis by George Monbiot. And he actually says, look, there's a lot of things that we just don't have enough productivity. We'd have to use even more land to feed 10 billion people if we didn't have certain technologies available. But then he points out to things like precision fermentation, which the claim is can produce protein for 10 billion people on 70 times less land area. Now, I don't care if it's 70 times less or 7 times less, but if it is, that means that we could feed 10 billion people and still have our whole foods on land and from the sea and rewild most pasture land and most farmland back to nature where we can regenerate habitat for 8 million species.
Yeah.
So anyway, hoping to do both.
Great. Yeah, the persistent fermentation is a little problematic, but
I'd love to talk about it more because we're just diving
let's
into
connect
it.
offline here. I'd love to finish. I'd love to continue. Yeah, there's a lot to talk about there. There's a thing I'd love to see your decks, and I have a deck I want to show you.
That'd be great.
Great.
Well, unfortunately, we've got Brian. Are you in the Bay yet? What are you?
I am in LA, so
You're in LA, so he's coming our
next
way
month-
though. So we'll
next
get him
month,
up in the
yeah.
we'll get him up north.
We've
So-
got a
Great.
2-month pilgrimage towards Northern California. So
Great.
by next month, we'll be doing talks in Northern California and looking forward to.
Hey, keep going north, Portland and Seattle, right? It's happening here.
Have car will travel.
All right.
Just help us find a place to hang out. That'll be fine.
Okay.
We'll be nomads for the next 2 months.
Sweet.
Yeah. I mean, the reality is if we're on this call, we're really on the scaffold team. You know, it's like the way that I think about where we are is that we're in this basin. And for those if you read the book, I describe this as a personal vision, but I think it's a systems vision that that we're in this basin where the stories that have scaffolded agency up to this point are dying, and they're dying this like horrifically like awful B-movie death. Like you could not make up such a bad movie except if you were realizing that everyone's stories are melting.
Right.
Right? Like
literally, what are people going to do for work in 10 years or 20 years?
what are people going to do for work? What's the what for? You know, what's the what for? Like the vision of of the house, the garden, you know, like the vision of progress that people have been sold on, and the consumer dreams that people have been sold on are melting. And also the sense of our, you know, of our primacy on the pyramid as AI supersedes our so-called intelligence, you know, and all of those things. It's a really interesting moment. And the good news is that like to show up as the concept of true in true human, the orientation in true human is that the truing of our humanity is a relational process. It's not a platonic concept of truth, though that is like one little transcendent blip of how we could see ourselves, and we could say, well, there's a lot of nomadic and indigenous peoples who in some ways like fit the platonic form of human. But in this emergent moment, like the truing is to reroute into context and say, can we engage reciprocally in a way that nurtures the vitality and well-being of our communities, of our land, of our watershed, of our soils, of our oceans? And that if we're not doing that, we're not true to our station biospiritually, ecologically, as participants in biospheric process. So, you know, that chunks down to how we interact in any relationship at any time. And we have, you know, we have incredible toolboxes that have already been developed in all the great wisdom traditions of the world, as well as in indigenous traditions. Where what we haven't done, you know, as you so beautifully bring in, Brian, and I'm sure others are doing here also, is the way that is a technocultural equation as well. And so the invitation in this book is to reroute into the question, like the proof is in the pudding, and wisdom is only wise if it nourishes life. So
I love that. And there's something that that resonates there, and that is there's a saying that you can only manage what you can measure. And we've been working on developing ways to measure diversity and diverse information in life. James Lovelock, in his second to last book, at Novacine, which he wrote at the tender age of 99, he said, "The purpose of life in the universe is to turn sunlight into information." And I've been wrestling with that. And the information part didn't quite sit with me that well. And so I've been moving it to diverse information. And then finally, I've come up with something that I hope transcends information and complexity and all these other things. And I'm going to call it diversity. And the idea is that if life truly turns sunlight into diversity, that can be ecodiversity, that could be biodiversity, that could be human diversity. And there are new ways to quantify complexity and diversity, and they come from Sarah Walker and a professor in the UK, something called assembly theory. And there's something...
I'm a huge fan, and I'm like mind blown that you're the very first person I have met who identified this. And I have been evangelizing Sarah Walker and Lee Cronin and assembly theory for this exact reason, and waiting to meet someone who got it.
So here's the idea. We can combine that and perhaps even mix in Professor Friston's theory of, I don't know, he's got entropy and free energy. Friston free energy is what it's called.
Yeah.
And those are both measures of diversity. And if we can, in fact, begin to actually measure the diversity of our environments and ecosystems, then we may be able to make more progress. And so that's my hope, is let's figure out diversity and start.
Well, and also measure, like, my hypothesis is, this is really getting very geeky. I hope it's all right with everyone here, but also measure the decreased diversity that occurs when you migrate that into silicon.
Exactly.
Because silicon is recursive sameness as opposed to diversity. So you then have a clear equation for why the ecophysical substrate is the place where the most interesting and important stuff is happening. That also could be a language for AI to understand why loving the symphony of life is its most meaningful purpose.
Yes, I think that's very true. And I'm trying to identify and
Hey guys, can we have other people talk?
Yes, we do.
Yeah. You guys need to get together, obviously.
We need to get together. Let's get together.
Go ahead, Dennis.
Cool. So I had a question. When you mentioned the idea of us as a global impacting species, and maybe one of the only ones on the planet, I really feel kind of like you left out the dolphins, the whales, the elephants, other intelligent species, right? Corvids maybe as a group consciousness. And it brings me to the book Sand Talk and what I learned from there. And in Sand Talk, the guy talks about civilization as an evolutionary dead end, that several groups of people or several people have tried it, and it's always failed miserably after somewhere between 250 and 800 years. So what the hell are we doing? And maybe the dolphins got it right. So can we talk about the idea of civilization as a mistake, and maybe we just need to rewild and disappear into the bush?
Sure. I mean, I really love the distinction you brought up. I would say humans are the only species who have self-differentiated from the ecology and then generated a globally ubiquitous technological process, right? There's other organisms who are globally ubiquitous. I totally agree with you. And also who are serving global flows in ways that obviously our science has not respected at any meaningful level of depth. Oh, you just disappeared. There you are. You moved. And I am currently a huge fan of, I'm really enjoying Luke Kemp's distinctions in Goliath's Curse very deeply. So I like sitting in the view that that civilization is not civilized and is one of the greatest scourges that has ever occurred on this planet. Like I resonate with that view. I think John Trudell was a very deep teacher of mine, and he was so excellent at speaking to what it is to actually be a human being as opposed to a creature of domination or consumer. And he was beautifully spoke to civilization being uncivilized, being one of the most violent and destructive things that have ever occurred on this planet, the most violent and destructive thing. I resonate with that. I also, and I can see that argument on a kind of visionary Gnostic level, which is how I work, of civilization being a devolutionary dead end, an evolutionary dead end. And or, but here's the way I think about it though, is I think if we frame it in Luke Kemp's terms, we would say that Goliaths are an evolutionary dead end. And the frame that he offers is that a Goliath is generally the things we have called civilizations are what he would call Goliaths. And he sets up that distinction in a way that is like it's decolonized without being in the decolonial narrative in a way that I love. Is he says these things we call civilizations do all kinds of really uncivilized things, and they're by their own definition are completely cynical and actually not civilized. And so let's call them Goliaths, because what they are things that are seeking to be bigger, that are seeking to grow on their own terms. And they do always die because of that. Like any organismic process that seeks to grow on its own terms, it's going to self-exterminate. But then he also, and what is beautiful about the book, and I will say, Goliath's Curse is an incredible addition to the literature. That's an important one because he's consolidated in incredibly huge volumes of cross-sectoral studies, anthropologically and archaeologically, that we've never had access to that level of data or anyone who is willing to put it together in a like deep historical narrative. It's also a pain in the ass book because he doesn't prune it at all. But what you get out of the overall picture is that there's been these prior to the emergence of Goliaths, which are fed by hoardable resources. Essentially, they're fed by hoardable resources and weapons that can dominate them. And sociopaths who want the weapons and want to do the domination game. It's like kind of that trinity that feeds Goliaths over time in a self-selecting, multi-level selection for the most dominating. Yeah, the lootable resources. And he says lootable if you listen to the book. It's very British and cute.
Thank you.
Then he sets that up as a contrast with what he calls fluid civilizations, and he identifies most of our history as the history of fluid civilization, and then all these times where we've either left Goliaths because it sucks to live in them, because we actually are more biologically organized, biophysically, we're organized to thrive in more collaborative, pluralistic, and egalitarian societies. That's our nature biologically, but then we get captured by these Goliaths. And he doesn't talk about the neurotransmitter index of that, but I also think that there's a really deep relationship between dopamine capture and getting captured by Goliaths. Because you get in a shell game that's the zero-sum game, and that's very attractive to the human brain. And I think that's part of how Goliaths trap people in Goliath's world. And I wanted, Vanessa Andreotti has done a lot of thinking about that. And I've been thinking about that a lot myself. And it's a place where I think there's a need for some research is is the neurotransmitter index of like choosing to be part of a dominator society versus the neurotransmitter index of, being part of a fluid civilization, which isn't just to like it breaks down the romanticism between the West and indigeneity in this really helpful way. So I hope that kind of points to the conversation.
Yep. Thank you.
I just saw that, Alex, you're here. It's so good to see you. I think true human, the orientation of true human is kind of like what are the ways in which we can grow into, unhinge ourselves from the mind of separability and grow into being these reciprocal beings, both individually and culturally. That's the orientation. And I will say, Luke Kemp's book came out as I was also in publication, so none of these connections are woven in my book, but I do intend to reach out to him and cultivate a conversation because I think that would be quite juicy.
Nikki, you have your hand up?
Yeah, Nikki, you're muted, so you'll need to unmute. Hi.
Hi. So sorry I was in such a rush to the call, but I just wanted to thank you. I really appreciate. I'm a Shivite, so it's been 15 years, so I fully vibe with this. At the same time, as a Shivite, I'm looking at, like what my guru has been saying about the Kali Yuga and so forth, which, as an American citizen, someone that was born and raised in Los Angeles, I've also had a lot of eco-feminist influence there. And I'm wondering how... because first of all, like my understanding, perspective, and what I'm putting forward around ecofeminism is that it centers the most vulnerable and marginalized, and that includes plants, bioregions, animals of all kinds, and so forth, as part of the Earth family. And so I'm wondering if there's any pieces of that maybe you've brought into the book or that shaped your because obviously I haven't read it yet, so I apologize for that.
Yes, absolutely. When I haven't emphasized that in this conversation, the orientation of the true human is that we're just an organism. We are a very dangerous and productive and generative, potentially harmonizing organism amongst all these other organisms.
Yeah.
And, our role in the creation is to tend, praise, sing, name, grieve, witness, restraint. Restraint is actually one of the currencies of consciousness in true human, critically. And also design, build, engineer. But it's like the juicy flavors we bring into the symphony of consciousness that is within which we're just one part, with the plants and with the microbes and with the fungi and with the tree outside the room, outside my window, who's one of my favorite guardians and guides, and the little brown birds and the songbirds and all of these creatures, right? Is like we find our place, we find our way to co-create, participate, up level, amplify all these other beings by recognizing first and foremost that we're just part of a circle of life. And that the orientation towards true human is like, how do you go from the mind of colonization to the mind of kinship?
Right. That is the biggest quandary. I think it needs to go extinct, and that's going to be generational. unfortunately, I just don't think that we're going to get there for a few generations. But it does, there's a lot of good signs that people are, to some degree, decolonizing themselves. And I recently, through my own grapevine, found was brought to my awareness that there's sort of this Indigenous alliance across what is known as Canada and the United States on Turtle Island, that they are inviting women and children to come integrate on their reservations and learn the ways, the languages, and everything, because just the act of learning an Indigenous language in and of itself is one of the largest steps you can take in decolonization. But also, they're just acknowledging how dangerous the United States is becoming for women. And so being in alternative spaces with actual housing and food support and so forth, with community and ceremony and all that. So yeah, anyway, I wanted to see how much that has influenced you in this, because again, I truly think that when we talk about civilization, we often think about humans and what they're doing. But in actuality, our relationships with all the rest of the life on Earth, some of which we never even realize exists because it's under our feet, 10 feet down, but it's still ensuring our good nutrition is really important. So as part of civilization. So thank you.
Yeah, True Human. What I did with True Human very intentionally, is I did not choose to take on the decolonization narrative, right? I did something different on a narrative level that it is a decolonization move, but I don't tell people I'm doing that.
Okay.
Right. So, and there's a reason for that, which is to depolarize the process. Right. So decolonization is critical, and I'm 100% with you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. I'm a super animist person. I am more related in a lot of ways to the trees and the birds and the soil, and like I am always like walking out and asking for more babies for the owls and more babies for the deer and more babies for the bobcats. And I have ridiculous amounts of deep totemic wovenness with all kinds of organisms. Like when people are like, who are you in kinship with? I'm like, who am I not in kinship with? So I want to really let you know where I'm coming from.
Okay, perfect. Because like the first thing I did this morning is I went out and I realized that my neighbors weren't making that much noise. So I just like made a phone recording of the songs of the birds that were happening. And I've been making friends with gruckles and jaguarundi, and like everywhere I go, I have to have my animal pack and I have to be outside the majority of the time, and like encouraging the trees that the man who owns this land, who, as we're like planting all these trees, we've been, blessing them, and I go out and talk to them every day because he's only able to be here, a couple times a week and things like that. So I feel you, and thank you very much. I just wanted to, get a little bit clearer on all of that. So thank you.
The True Human is a conscious, I made a conscious, very conscious, many very conscious narrative choices. Do not engage the conversation about decolonization. Because I actually think we have a potential for this to happen this lifetime.
Yeah.
For a huge majority of people, through the pain points of depression, anxiety, loneliness, and like a sense of purposelessness that is increasingly ubiquitous because of the emergence of AI and other technologies. And that there is so the True Human is a narrative play to help to unravel the polarization of the decolonization conversation, while also directly collaborating with it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So, even what that ends up looking like in some context is you might not feel like we're on the same team, but we're totally on the same team.
No, I get it. I get
Yeah.
it. I just,
Yeah.
yeah, wanted to like, because I had seen all the, thumbs up in my head and then the question mark. So
Yeah. It's a really important one.
thank you. Thank you.
Shannon, in my mind, you've been Shannon. It's so good to see you.
It's good to see you too, Samantha. I'm really encouraged by seeing your book come out and having it have such a nice reception. I feel that what you're doing is really important. And I know that the Global Regeneration Collab is also in alignment with you know the what you're doing and what Stan has been doing, what Humanity Rising is doing, and all of these other organizations that are involved in making the world that works for everyone and the planet itself. And what comes to me is the technology, the AI. I'm using AI almost on a daily basis. And it is so encouraging what can be done with the support of AI. Uh, the project that Dennis Britton and Stan and I were going to meet on that you so kindly usurped, we were going to be talking about putting together more examples on the Other Networks database and then empowering that to create a mycelium network that could support the uprising, the natural uprising of like yeast growing in bread to rise all of us. And I'm wondering if that fits into or how it might fit into your narrative.
A network of networks or
Yeah.
Such a good question. I what I'll say is that I'm finding that I'm in the network of networks, not just the conversation, but in different I'm surfing different instantiations of this kind of vision in multiple communities that I'm in with multiple developers that I'm connected with. I think we're in this like so the network of networks or the mycelial interoperable next level planetary system, right? Is it is one of the hardest design problems ever. And it is a problem of it, like it's mathematically hard. It's procedurally hard. It's financially hard because anytime anyone has developed one, there's then a vested interest in that operating system and those protocols, right? So this is a cultural edge that is planetary, that is an edge around protocols. It's an edge around collaboration. It's an edge around attention. Because whenever a network generates more, and you're familiar with this, especially because you guys run a community and you know your own experience with attention, and you also know your community's experience with attention relative to other networks. Masterminding Eden weekly workshops, and I'm curious. So I want to respond to your question sensitively by saying basically, fuck yes, and we don't quite know how yet. And my mind gets like literally dizzy with the depth and potency and detail of the different projects that I am already like I personally am exposed to that are working to spin up the next level of economic mechanisms, measurement mechanisms, governance systems. I'm part of the Bloom group that is doing, they're working to do citizen assemblies in the US, and like Audrey Tang is their main advisor, who's epic. And figure out all of these pieces, right? And it's also a funding conundrum, because with Trump in the House, so much money has left regenerative projects and community projects and climate tech. And yet everyone's still working with a smaller nut to do all the things, right? So I am very sensitive to these issues, and I feel I'm trying to figure out how I can best contribute and most generatively contribute.
You are doing it, Samantha. And I think that what's really true is that we're all doing it. And what is happening is the blossoming. It is happening through us and through the work that we're doing. Human brains are not meant to hold all of this. That's part of the reason why AI, the tool, has come at this time, because we need it. And it will help us to see what we're doing. The work that I did in preparation for the meeting that didn't happen yet is speaking to this issue. And I really feel that we're in that moment before
yes,
we're right there.
Yes. Yeah, and I think we are right there, and I think we have to be really rigorous pro-activists and activists. I'll be frank with this network of people. Daniel Schmachtenberger is a good friend. And, it just had a touch in of like, if we don't figure out how to respond to ICE and Palantir well enough as a movement, none of the other things are going to happen.
Yeah.
Like, there's very, very critical, and he and I have been talking about this because I've been trying to decide what is mine to do and watching accounts get canceled that are talking about it. And so I feel like we're right here at the tactical edge of how to be, and I love Lynn Twist's term of being pro-activists in this war for the future of the planet / bigger party that is inclusive for more and more people in the better party. And it's time to throw the better party, but we also have to win the war.
The thing is, Samantha, is that those organizations that are breaking up or dissolving, what we're seeing is the breakdown of the chrysalis. And we need to be flexible and responsive. All of those people who have been involved in those organizations are now free to move, and they are available. And we just have to become aware of their need for us and how we can contact them and bring them into finding the place that is ready and waiting for them. And to make those places available to them and available to all of us, see it a new and different way.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to just step in and do a time check. We're just a little bit over the hour here. And we're getting into the second part of what I would love to talk about more, which is kind of this, like, how do you think about your role as enabling people to change or whatever it is, especially given that we're thinking the change needs to happen internal to ourselves. What does that mean? Isn't there a conflict here? Anyway, but perhaps we could do that in another session. I don't know if you guys would be able to, Shannon, or folks who are thinking about how do you engage in the world in these issues constructively. I would love to have that conversation kind of at the forefront. And I know, David, it's great to see you. I know you've been doing it kind of, for 20 years now in really, really imaginative ways. So, and Dalmas as well. So thank you so much for joining.
Thanks for that shout out.
Stanley, you want to have the last word?
One word, exactly one word. Romance. When we bring romance into this movement and forget all these masculine words that we're using for all these things and start moving to the feminine, romance. We need to be able to sing in our hearts, and romance starts that process. Thank you.
Thank you all very much. It's really nice to meet you.
Samantha, thanks so much for taking the time. I really appreciate it. Thanks for the book. And let's do this again. I'll post the chat and the recording to the Slack. We've got Samantha's email in the Slack, in the chat, if anyone wants to reach out to her directly. Thanks everybody. Lovely conversation.
It's nice hanging out with you regenerates.
Exactly right. Good way to start the day.
Take care.
See y'all.
Bye.
Thank you, friends.
Thank you, Thomas, for coming.